All right, folks. We're going to wait for y'all to get on in before we start the show. Stay tuned.
Behold the Anomaly Archives poster. Gaze upon its magnificence. But please keep it down, for there is Shashi the alien. Do not be alarmed. But who is that mysterious MIB digging deep into the files? Steady your gaze. Patty the cryptid is elusive, and to catch even a faint glimpse is quite an achievement. Thrill at the horror of a living challenged apparition who has stopped by to study a forgotten tome. Elsewhere, scattered about, the keen eye will observe artifacts of sacred and forgotten lore. After a long gaze one may grow envious and wish to possess a physical manifestation of this grand visage. What once seemed like an insurmountable expedition is now made into an effortless side quest. For now, at the Archives shop, one can find this thrilling representation available for acquisition, where, among the usual wares, denizens of this fair land will find this and other scrolls, exquisite apparel, hot beverage drinking vessels, and a plethora of other treasures. Enough to satisfy the desires of any who seek the most elusive emotion of all, fulfillment.
Hi there, my name is Chris Rutkowski. I'm a science writer specializing in weird stuff like UFOs and ghosts and paranormal stuff. I'm donating my entire collection of UFO files from across Canada, specializing in Manitoba, to the University of Manitoba Archives and Special Collections. As part of that, Archives wants to digitize all this so everybody can be able to look at it from wherever in the world they may be. For the time being, though, it's actually going to be in the archives. But to facilitate this digitization, we need your help. We need to crowdsource some money so that we can pay somebody to digitize this whole thing. So please consider helping to digitize the UFO Archives of Canada at the University of Manitoba. And you can read all about my stuff right here.
You know, we're archiving it, we're virtualizing it. What it is that the human neural net, the unconscious of the species, is actually being hardwired as an artifact. We're pouring glass and gold and silicon down the microtubules of the racial imagination, and as it were making a kind of casting of the state of the human imagination at the close of the millennium. And to what degree this imaging of ourselves in silicon will ever reach a limit is hard to tell. I mean, we've begun with the past. You know, we're archiving it, we're virtualizing it, we're creating databases that allow us to stroll around in it. But more and more time will be consumed, and eventually the only choice will be to allow it to flow over into the present. You know, we're archiving it, we're virtualizing it.
Up next, Ken Adams with a special screening of Imaginatrix, the Terence McKenna Experience.
Hello, everybody. This is Smiles Lewis, and you are joining us for a special Streamathon special guest feature with my good friend Ken Adams. Ken Adams is a visual artist working in the video medium, whom I've known for many, many years now, and we're pleased and honored to have him join us today for a special screening of Imaginatrix, the Terence McKenna Experience. And before I continue, let's bring on Ken. Hey, Ken, how you doing?
I'm well. Thanks for having me. Thanks for going to all this trouble.
No trouble at all. Thank you so much for joining me. And I've been reflecting on trying to remember exactly how we met. And I know that the first time I think I became aware of you and your work was because of the Alien Dreamtime video that you did with that featured Terence McKenna raving at a rave, I believe in San Francisco in the early 1990s, and it was through I think our mutual friend Wes Nations, the publisher then of Crash Collusion magazine, one of the alternative media zines that turned me on to the alt media zine scene of the 1990s, and after having watched the video, he was like, "Hey, would you write a review of it since you were so excited by it?" And I was like, "Well, yeah." So I wrote a review that got published. It was one of the few or earliest published things I ever wrote, and I don't recall if we immediately if he put us into contact or if it was some short time later. But I know it must have been before 1999 or thereabouts, because of course you were going to be we were going to show Alien Dreamtime at the 2001 National UFO Conference. So, and I also remember that around this time, as I was starting to hang out with you, we discovered our mutual friend, Mac White. And I remember that was like, it was one of those like, oh my God, it's such a small world. Can you recall any more detail as to how exactly we met?
No, those are good refreshers. They all bring back good memories, so that's good.
Yeah.
No, really, I was trying to figure it out the other day, and I thought about the film fest part, and well, West Nations, man, I haven't been around anybody that knew Wes for a long time on the West Coast, and that's a kind of a close-up reminder. He was a really beautiful dude, and he had a lot of fun doing what he was doing, and we need more of that. We need some people that are writers too. Is something when I think about that period, we were doing Sluggo magazine, and people were writing and saying intelligent stuff about what was going on in the world to each other in these small little subcultural groups. And that reminds me of that, and how ironically, now we can be in touch with anyone over the internet, and we can have groups of friends of the thousands. And it's changed everything quite a bit. I'm not sure how you get together a small cadre of revolutionaries anymore, but I would like to hear that somebody else is figuring that out.
Yes, me too. Yeah, I think West Nations brought together a lot of great minds and a lot of good souls, and he is sorely missed. But it was his library that became a part of my own when he moved from Austin out west, because he wanted better vistas. He wanted to travel and see more and better landscapes, so to speak. Well, actually, quite literally. And then he became a travel blogger. So, well, I know you've done your share of traveling, and you're no longer in Austin, and you went west at least a little bit. And I'm curious to get to reminisce about and dig a little deeper into how you came to be the visual artist that you are. I know that some of these stories probably were told amongst ourselves when we were first getting to know each other, but for the benefit of our audience, can you describe how you were led into the visual arts media?
Yeah. The very first and probably most crucial thing was I went to a big traveling museum show that was in San Antonio about abstract expressionist painters, and I had never taken fine art very seriously. It just seemed like a con job that people pulled on the wealthy, and there's a lot of truth to that, but there's also this incredible miracle of creativity spanning the ages that we call art. And so I took a lot of LSD, and this girlfriend of mine took me to the museum, and we hung out for like 6 hours looking at abstract expressionist paintings. And I realized what I was missing, what a huge part of the human experience. I was shuffling into a category and ignoring it, and I fell in love with it. And then I started going to see shows and stuff. And at time I was making like gallery stuff and working for well-known artists in New York and some in Houston and San Francisco, and I liked it very much. But I wrote a grant and got an NEA grant, and I bought a computer called an Amiga computer with it, and it was the first computer that you could do color and video and this kind of stuff with. It was quite exciting, and I walked out of the gallery world, and at the same moment that was happening, literally at the same precise time, I heard a interview with Terence McKenna on a radio program in the Lower East Side, and when it was a real burned out zone and things were pretty apocalyptic feeling. And I had read a couple of things by Terence, but I heard this talk on the radio, an interview with, I forget who it was. There's somebody we both knew. So I waited in the store to see who the hell was this guy talking out loud about psychedelics and advocating psychedelics out loud. And it was Terence, and my lover and I, Britt Willeen, took our car and our new baby computer and drove across country and found Terence almost without looking for him, and started working together on what computer graphics would be suitable for furthering the psychedelic revolution that we both were so devoted to. And that's what happened. We spent like the next 4 or 5 years together, me learning computer stuff, because there was no place to go. There was no internet. There was an internet, but there weren't browsers and communities of people that you could casually reach out to. It was still a very small club. And when we would have user groups for this computer, there'd be like sometimes 200 or 300 people, like in LA or New York, that had the computer and didn't know how to use a lot of it because there weren't any places to go to find out. So that's really the part of this discussion that, it jumped into being a really valuable tool to promote psychedelics and advocate a psychedelic worldview. And it seemed like it would be a lot more efficient than writing a bunch of books, because there were already so many really good books, incredibly good books. And when I would walk into a good bookstore, I'd think, why am I going to make another book? If people want to read a really good book about any subject, there are many. And there's almost no experimental psychedelic movies because nobody had the gear to do it until right then. It came out of nowhere and it was there. And it's been a really incredible ride. I feel psychedelics and computers, to me, are so similar and so completely interrelated in my own life, through my work, and just what I see reflecting on the world as an intellectual. There's a whole lot of crossover there. And just like psychedelics, we barely have begun to understand the value of the whole psychedelic thing, the whole silicon part of this thing, and how it will change all of us forever, and already has, and will continue to as long as we have electricity and can run computers.
Yes. Until the
may not be too long,
Right, until the great EMP knocks us all back into the Stone Age.
The big EMP, I used to wait around like, it could be any moment now.
Yeah.
I was on Enchanted Rock in Texas, tripping real hard during what was that big event where they thought the world was coming into synchronicity? It was something to do with the Mayan configuration with Arguelles and harmonic convergence.
Yeah.
So I go to this place in Texas, and it's a big old brain-shaped rock in the middle of the desert, and everybody's tripping. Everybody that came for this thing was tripping, it seemed like. And then at some point, there was this big, like, plasma event way off in the horizon, out in the open plains, like some big, blaring white out of the sky. And I thought it was the end. I thought for sure we are here at the end of time right now. And it was nothing. And nobody ever explained it, and nobody ever had any evidence that it ever happened. So I'm pretty sure it's probably something I gave myself to fulfill my apocalyptic expectations.
Well, that location, yes, Enchanted Rock, of course, has a long sacred history with the native population and all of us post-native natives. Well, as I mentioned, Alien Dreamtime was my introduction to your style of art, and these attempts to approximate the psychedelic experience through computer imagery and visual computer art. And I go back to that movie over and over and over again, largely because I as a McKenna fan, there's just something in that particular performance of his that is just so heart-wrenchingly warming and evocative for me about his ethos. And I don't want to conflate your belief systems with his, but you're intimating that you spent a long period of time with him and got to know him and worked with him as far as like recording him. What was that like? How did that friendship or relationship evolve?
I went to my favorite LSD connoisseur in San Francisco when I found out that Terence was living in California, and I asked him, "You know this guy named Terence McKenna any way to find how to be in touch with him?" And he immediately tapped a pad right in front of me next to the phone. This is way before cell phones and even answering machines were a novelty. And there was a number with no name. And I looked at it and I said, "You have to be kidding." And he said, "No, that's the number." I called it right on the spot. Somebody in his family answered that I won't bring into the story, and passed me to another phone and said, "He's at Esalen. He's probably sitting by a phone right now because I just talked to him. Call now and you'll probably get him." And called immediately. It was Terence on the other end of the phone. "Do you know where Esalen is?" "Of course I know where Esalen is." "What about Esalen?" He says, "Well, why don't you meet me there tomorrow? I'll probably be hiding under a tree smoking pot." And I said, "Oh, okay." So we drove up to meet him. He was hiding under a tree smoking pot and wearing these like gigantic science fiction Bootsy Collins sunglasses. And we told him what we were about. We were artists. We had somehow found out how to buy one of these insanely expensive machines. And we wanted to spend the rest of our lives making psychedelic media with the most interesting people we could find. And he was at the very top of that list, of course. And he said, "That's cool. You're poor and you have a really expensive computer and you want to do psychedelic media. I'm with you. You can start planning and making anything happen you want to happen. You have my encouragement. And if you can, try to move as close as you can so we can make it easier to work together." And he was living in the Redwoods in a little tiny village called Camp Meeker. And we went down the ferry trail a couple of 100 yards from where he lived with his family and rented a cabin in the Redwoods and plugged in the computer and started working and figuring out how to use all this equipment and something worth doing with it. And then we made Alien Dreamtime in 1993, and it was at a live rave event that went on for 2 nights, and it was huge. It made a huge impact on all of our lives, everybody involved. When we did the show, 3 of the participants were in a state of pregnancy or married to somebody in a state of pregnancy. One of the couples was illegal from England. McKenna got out of a bed with a very high temperature that he'd been in for 10 days and did this performance with no rehearsal at all. The musicians, no rehearsals at all. And when we had things set up in this big warehouse in San Francisco, the cops came in early with a whole lot of cops, like 12 cars and a lot of cops carrying their sticks prominently. And it was too early for what we had planned for the event, but we just got together, huddled together, McKenna and the musicians and me and my partner, and we decided to just get on stage and go. And that if they were going to come in and beat up a bunch of hippie kids, we were going to be in the middle of this event and make it matter. And then when we got on stage, Terence went over to the mic, and the first thing he said is, "The police are coming in full force. Everybody that has any kind of a camera, please come to the front of the stage and point it at a cop. And let's get this thing started." And we did. And we ran the whole thing there with all these cops wishing they could beat up all these kids that were tripping. But because we had cameras and it was 1993, they didn't know what the fuck to do. They didn't have a clue. They were completely paralyzed. it was very heavy-handed. And they came back the very next night and tried to do it again, and it got really hairy. And it was not easy to go in public and talk about psychedelics, and especially in a place where you're going to get media attention, like in San Francisco. So that's where all that started.
You know, and I remember that, and I think I'm remembering correctly, that yeah, there was this real rising tension amongst the authorities across the country about raves and the dangers and drug use and all this, and certainly, you know, there's always examples of underage people or ill-experienced people drinking too much, doing something that they have no experience with. That's always a problem, and even with legal drugs. So, but yeah, I remember the rising tensions, and then I think I heard some of this in association with Terence. Of course, my back then I would have jumped to the conclusion that, see, they're just it's this worldview that he's espousing that's somehow a part of it. But I don't even think it's that so much as just this the old tensions between youth, the counterculture and fun-loving people, you know, and the authorities. But that's perhaps a conversation for another time. But I'm so glad that y'all were able to pull that off without it turning violent, and I think it did. I think that video and so many of Terrence's recordings continue to reverberate and have long-lasting ripple effects through society. And I still think I find it so amazing when I come across somebody who's just discovering his work, and the like crazy cadence of his speechifying. But you went on from there to work on some other projects with him, including, I believe, is he in Strange Attractor?
Mm-hmm.
So how did that come about, and what was that like?
The whole Middle East was blowing up, and the first of all these waves of interminable wars, and we were very concerned about it. We were very activist in our attitude, even within the psychedelic community. We were always pushing the peace and love part of the movement, and a war had started, and there didn't seem to be hardly any response at all from most of the psychedelic world. But you got to remember, most of the psychedelic world was basically the Grateful Dead tribe, you know, and a handful of other people, but a small handful. And there wasn't any interest in politics. There wasn't any interest in war. The Deadheads and the jam band people still don't give a fuck about politics, from my opinion, and have left a lot of people stranded in a world where the party's not so great once the festival is over. And I'm frustrated with that. I was frustrated about it then. And Terence and I made some movies. One we showed at Stanford during a psychedelic convention called What Do We Want and When Do We Want It? A very anti-war piece. Then we moved into doing these other things, and one of the bigger of those projects was a project we were doing together called Strange Attractor. Ostensibly, it's about a couple that are doing psychedelics to coordinate their human biocomputer form and opening up portals to otherwise inaccessible realms. And there's a kind of a terrorist background thing that has to do with the Middle East that became very prophetic. We described this internet network, underground network of video stuff that we called the web, and that people would be able to put any kind of video that they wanted to in places where it could live forever, or they could hide stuff where it could be released if something happened to them. So we were like writing about a political world that was blowing up in front of us, and the counterculture had just disappeared. So we were trying to approach this through a kind of a cyberpunk story, and the movie took forever to finish, trying to make a living and eventually having children and trying to manage all the problems that come for a person like Terence when you get up in front of whoever will listen and advocate revolutionary and illegal stuff, which she did all the time. And it kind of blew up, but we finished the movie, and it's one of the weirdest movies I've ever seen. And it's got a whole lot of predictions about what's going to happen in the Middle East and stuff, all of which became remarkably manifest. And it has to do with a Gnostic cult that still barely exists in the Middle East called the Mandaeans. And so we did all this stuff together, and in the same time, we had a baby. We had 2 babies in that time, and Terrence's world blew up. It's very hard to do this stuff. At one point, I showed this movie to some friend of mine, a new friend, the Strange Attractor movie, and out of the 7 people that were primary contributors, only 2 of them were both still alive and not pretty patently crazy. I'm putting myself in a maybe not crazy bracket. But otherwise, people had died and gone off the deep end, disappeared. It was a real underground. It wasn't a pretend thing, and it wasn't something that you could just do on the side. You were, by circumstances, engulfed by this stuff. The day I decided to make a movie with Terence McKenna was really pivotal, and it happened more than once where I signed up again for another chunk of it, but it was very expensive in a lot of ways for all those people that were involved in trying to keep that thing alive.
Well, we've been over the course of the Streamathon playing occasional videos by you. You've continued doing a variety of visual art creation, and I'm always intrigued at seeing what you've come up with lately. Several years ago, you shared with me your Imaginary Muslims project and some of the stuff that you were doing with your American Satori projects, and it's always, to my mind, visually stunning and as you've been expressing recently to me, archivally oriented. One of the things that we've been playing, of course, is the promo video that you did for the Terence McKenna Archives, another worthy archive that we hope folks will support, and that we want to see further its longevity and to preserve his legacy. So you obviously you're still finding inspiration to do these videos. What's that like now versus how that was like then, as far as, with obviously McKenna having passed, gosh, over 20 years now.
I did 20.
So yeah, like what's your creative process like these days? Is it drastically different than back then? I guess the render time is different.
Render time's different, and storage is different, and all those physical things literally make a huge difference. It's just part of the thing. So you can make bigger, longer, better, prettier, more beautiful stuff now than you could 30 years ago, of course. So that part's changed, but I think more as I moved to a very rural area about 6 years ago now in Northern California, outside of Nevada City. And I wanted to both know what isolation was about, but I also wanted my canvas to be nature and not concrete and traffic jams and, urban life. I'd only lived in urban environments for any length of time. And I wanted to know what it was like to not have a calendar or a clock staring me in the face, and not to really give a damn what anybody thought about what I was doing. Nobody cared. Nobody knew if I was dead or alive. And then I had a heart attack living way out in the woods, and it took a long time to get to a hospital, and it got to be pretty gnarly from my own existential perspective. And I realized I wasn't going to live forever, and that I should be very conscious about how I'm spending my creative time. And I was being very prolific. Once I got in the woods, I just started pouring stuff out. It was very interesting. But after I recovered some from the heart attack thing and got back to work, it was just so fluid and so easy to work because you know why you're working. You also know that you're not going to live forever, which everybody thinks they know. But once you really run into it, it can be pretty sad. And it's great to think that it's all wonderful and beautiful. And I thought that's how I would die. But when it actually started caving in on me, and I realized you're way out in the woods, it takes a long time to get here and a long time to get to the hospital. You may not be living through this. And I went into some places where they were probably close to being dead. I don't know what to call them. And I really hungered deeply to be still alive. I wanted to love the people that I care about. I wanted to do something to put my work into some kind of shape for legacy, both behind me and going forward. And mostly, it's real simple. I wanted to love my children who I hadn't been around enough, a handful of other people. And I wanted to just make sure they understood how beautiful they were and how important they had been in my life. And I do that. And I make a whole hell of a lot of movies. I also found a young man who's a prodigy named Evan Prescott, who's literally just an incredible musical prodigy. And he lived out here in this bizarre rural area that I'm living in. And he'd been trained as a composer. And I met him, he was 19, and he gave me like 30 incredible soundtracks in about 5 months, right? Which is unheard of. And they were beautiful and really fluidly flexible. They could change around real fast and fit my style very well. And since then, I've been working mostly with him and another musician, Didier Cremio, who I've been working with on different things for 30 years. And he's an avant-garde guy. He's a French guy living in New York City. And one of my oldest and most loved friends. So working with those people has made it a lot easier, because working with actors is really troublesome. Working with musicians can be really problematic because they want to do things over, or they want to like add this or that, and it's hard to get more than a couple of pieces a year out of them. So I feel really lucky that I've got this really talented little setup of musicians at my disposal. I can't wait to send them a link to this, because they'll be amused to be talked about, both of them. Well, so that makes it easy. Seriously, yeah.
Yeah, they've I think most of the things that we've played, I think, have featured Evan, yeah, Prescott.
And most of the newest stuff is his.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Really enjoy it. And like I said, the visuals are always amazing. So as we move towards the screening for Imaginatrix, can you tell us about, I know you've got a very personal story. Here you were somebody who worked intimately with McKenna during his life, and then, as I say, he passed in 2000, and there's so much that he's missed, including the build up to the Y2K. Is it now I'm blanking on his phrase for the ingression of novelty towards that. The moment.
But time wave zero, I think, is what you mean. Time wave zero.
Thank you, time wave zero, and this ingression of novelty idea, and the idea of the kind of sort of a singularity idea before it really had taken off. And there's so much that's happened since that I, of course, wonder what he would think about. But you had an experience that, if I'm remembering correctly, is what led to your decision to go back through those archives and make Imaginatrix, correct?
Absolutely. In fact, I caught how you said that I worked with him during his lifetime or something like that. So yeah, it was 7 years after Terence passed away. I was camping with my family in Colorado, pretty high altitude, but still car camping with kids. Nothing super dramatic. And I had a brand new camera, high def video camera, so I was down on my hands and knees around the fire late at night, shooting fire videos while wearing a baseball cap and glasses. Okay, so I wasn't just some idiot sticking my face in the fire. I was an idiot with glasses. And I got real close and was doing this, and something popped out of the fire. A cinder popped out of the fire and found its way through that tiny little access of space and landed on my cornea and like burned it off in real time. And it was excruciatingly painful, and we couldn't leave until dawn the next morning or near daylight. And essentially, the people in an emergency situation put me in touch with an experimental surgeon that was doing adult stem cell experiments, and he had done some stuff on corneas. So I went to this place to meet him with my family in tow in the middle of this camping trip, and he said, "Yeah, I've only done this twice. It worked pretty good one time and not at all the other time." And he said, "On the other hand, you're never going to see out of that eye again unless something like this happens. And whatever else happens, we need to clean up your eye right now because it's been making more damage by not being out. There's literally charcoal on your eye." And so I said, yes, all of the yes. I'm willing to do whatever you think might happen. And we did it, and he did the surgery, and I had to be conscious so I could look to the left and look to the right while he was shaving off a layer of my cornea. And it was pretty fucking interesting. And he told me to go sit in a room with the least amount of noise and light possible, to eat as little as possible, to drink as little as possible, because any movement, even responding to a sound from outside the room, would cause the eye to move and wipe off these very delicate stem cells that were hopefully going to grow a new cornea. And so I sent my family off, and I sat in a room in the dark for 5 days, meditating and fasting, and had all sorts of psychedelic type experiences, encounters with beings and worlds made out of jewels and this kind of stuff. And so finally I got to go back and, after 5-6 days, check in with the doctor, and he said, "Your eyes look amazing. You probably are going to have a cornea. You can go out wearing a pirate patch on your eye, and don't get near anything like a fire or a shower. Don't go swimming." And so I hook up with my family, and we go out to the campgrounds again. And during that night, the first night back out in the woods, I took some photos using flashlights, and also photos of my kids inside of a tent that was there moving around lights and stuff. So I was kind of trying to be creative with one eye. I was very concerned about, am I going to ever be able to really see good enough to use a computer again, or that kind of thing. And I took a bunch of pictures. Everybody went to bed after a while to sit around the fire and stuff. And in the middle of the evening, I had a visitation with Terence, who had been dead 7 years at the time. And it was not a dream, and it wasn't LSD or any psychedelic substance. It wasn't like it was unlike anything I'd read about or heard about, and I call it a visitation between two friends, and we immediately were in this other realm where he was preparing to leave to the other country, which was death, and that we could sit here and talk to each other while other people were helping him load up an SUV with all his most important stuff. And we were around this house that was a real nice, like, kind of Frank Lloyd Wright house with layers, levels, and redwood trees and fog. And we both laughed about that. We were like the characters in that movie Contact, where what's her name, Jodie Foster is talking to a version of her father that is on a beautiful beach with weird swirling colors in the sky, and that you have to kind of make an agreement on where you're going to get the meeting to happen, and you want the foggy part so it sucks detail out of the picture that you don't have to keep accounting for. And otherwise, we both like Northern California and redwood trees, so we were in a place we had constructed for this visitation, and we laughed about jokes from that movie and other movies. And this whole experience started that lasted for a very long time. It wasn't a flash. It was like maybe an hour, maybe more of stuff that went down. And a lot of it was just amazing, phenomenally amazing things. Like, he told me that there were things in in the archives that nobody had ever seen. And he reminded me that now that he's dead, that means they're more valuable and people will be more interested in them. And he tried to talk me kind of inadvertently at first, and then very directly, he talked me into making another movie. And he also called into question me living in a very kind of convenient life of raising kids and having a good job doing very cool artistic stuff. But I wasn't really doing anything to help save the planet. You know, I wasn't doing anything about the psychedelic awakening except trying to not go to jail. And a bunch of other things. One of the more interesting things is he gave me a list of statistically improbable phrases. It was something they used to do in Amazon with certain books. They would have a list of unlikely phrases in the book that were always interesting and revealing. So he gave me a list of these to remember, and told me that when I heard them, in each case, they would be coming from somebody who was either a collaborator or a benefactor for making this movie that he wanted to make sure got made. And every one of them came true. I wrote them all down the next morning, and every one of them happened. And every one of them led to either somebody I didn't know giving me money, which is always a happy, happy experience, or somebody that was crucial to making this movie. And it was quite amazing. So all sorts of things that happened in there. He made jokes about my drinking so much coffee. He told me I'd live longer if I didn't eat a lot of pork, and he gave me a stack of these really interesting things. Some of them were books that I had loaned him. He said I needed to return these, and he there was this real futuristic looking thing on the top of this stack of books. And I said, "That was just some new work of yours?" And he goes, "No, that's a work of yours in the future, that you really need to turn your mind to the future because it's shrinking fast, and your kids and everybody else are going down with the ship. And you know, there's really an emergency on the planet, and very few people are dealing with it in any way." So that was part of it. All these different things happened that triggered literally hundreds of synchronicities in life back in the other world. So we finished our vacation in this camping trip. All this thing is happening, and while we're out still on the vacation, every day somebody completely accidentally, anonymously brings themselves to introduce themselves to me and my kids, and tell us as a matter of some side story that they happen to be friends with this guy named Terence McKenna. And we were way off trail sometimes, and this happened. I mean, it was freaky. My kids were freaked out. I was a little freaked out. We finished this insane amount, not insane, incredible, miraculously weird vacation. We go home, back to our place in Austin. I unload the car, make sure we all get fed, everybody's exhausted, goes to bed. I go to my computer, and I know I'm immediately going to go to my business computer with all my business arts and stuff on it, and cut it into two pieces, all the business stuff on one folder and all my private art stuff in the other folder. And when I go in there to turn on the computer, first time I've turned it on in like 6-7 weeks, because we've been on this extended vacation, and I turn it on, and in the very middle of the screen by itself, inexplicably is a folder that says MCK for McKenna audio samples. And I got this jolt because I hadn't touched any like that in a long time. Anything to do with the Terence archives and stuff was not working on anything like that for at least 10 years. You know, it was a long time. And I was kind of shaken, and I clicked on the folder, and there were 12 audio samples, and I clicked on the top one, and it was Terence, and he said, "I'm speaking to you from the Imaginatrix, a realm beyond death and that shamans and some artists know how to reach." And it's basically the opening lines of the movie Imaginatrix, and appears as a closing segment also. And it was quite jarring. In fact, even right now, it causes me to get a chill. And I'm a rationalist, and I really don't know how to explain all these things, but I know that they happened to myself, and I made this movie as a direct result to this anomalous encounter with a friend from beyond the grave. It was also fun to talk to him when he was alive.
Right. Wow. Yeah, that is such an amazing story, and I remember you telling me about it, you know, sometime after that, and it just still it's really powerful. Well, I can't wait to share this film with our audience tonight, and so you're still producing work, and folks can see your work. We've got the link on the website to where you post a lot of your newer and older stuff. And got any specific current projects you want to mention that you're working on?
Well, I've had to kind of respond to this prolific surge of making all these little movies, and ever since the pandemic's been here, I've been working around a concept of anomaly, which is a French word from sociology that means normlessness. And I see that the whole culture is engulfed in an ocean of normlessness. The whole world is. And usually that's seen as a dangerous and scary thing, but it's also the only time when seriously major changes can be conceived and imagined into reality. And so what I'm trying to make is a bunch of short little weird movies that emphasize the point that there's no norms right now. You can associate anything you want with anything else. In fact, it's very important that you do this, because that's how creativity really gets catalyzed, is through juxtaposition, associations, and disassociations. So I'm making a lot of them, and then I'm trying to experiment to see if they work better. I have a group that are lullabies, and I have a group that are danceable, and I have a group that are just like ambient, experimental, very avant-garde. And I was trying to see if mixing those together, segregating them by groups, which ways of those do people like watching, and how do they watch it? Like, people watching 10 videos that are all under 2 minutes long is different than watching one video that's 20 minutes long. That's very different. And so I'm trying to play around with that, and it's interesting. I can tell that I'm really at a stage where I could go a lot of different directions with how to manifest all this energy and stuff. And I still don't know for sure how to arrange the pieces, but I really like the pieces a lot. And the feedback I get when I show the things clumped together is really positive, and it's a different way. People think they understand what's going on no matter what. Our minds tell us that we're making sense of things all day long, no matter what, even if we're completely fucked up in QAnon world, chasing rabbits across the rainbow. It's just the way we are. Or if you're a profoundly intelligent and wise person, you're still chasing this bubble thing. Nobody's really out of their own recursive loop of knowledge and experience. So I'm trying to show that, and also invite people, especially young people, have courage and make changes. Have the courage to make changes for real. This is the time. It's not rehearsal. It's right now.
This is not the dress rehearsal for the apocalypse.
Not anymore. I mean, we hung around and rehearsed for you and I a long time.
Yes.
It was fun.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Ken, for joining us. I really appreciate it. And then thank you for being the creative soul that you are. And I can't wait to continue to see your latest works. And I really can't wait to see you again in person so I can give you a big hug and when we be reunited here in Austin. And stay right there. And folks, you can go to the anomalyarchives.org website and you can find all the links to Ken Adams' work. Thank you so much for joining us. The story continues.
Up next, a special screening of Imaginatrix, the Terence McKenna experience.
You must have the gift of second sight, else it says to nothing to you.
That's it. I'm out of here. Thank you, everybody. This has been an amazing 6 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 days, 6 streamathons, and I'm just, I can't express how thankful I am to everybody who's donated, and whether it be in money and time or both or everything, positive psychic energy, much appreciated. We will keep you posted as to where the Anomaly Archives is at in the coming days, weeks, months, years. And we are still looking for a new location. So you've seen the contact info. There it is. You can send email or call that number and leave details if you have any leads on really good locations for an Anomaly Archive. So yeah, where are we at? Wow. 11-1. Wow. Okay. Thank you, everybody. is Miles Lewis with the Anomaly Archives 501c3 Scientific Anomaly Institute here in Austin, Texas, signing off for the final Streamathon of 2020. Thank you, everybody, for all your help and everything. Somehow we will get through this all. And good night.